The morning sun cast long shadows across the Silver Creek Ranch as Margaret Maggie O'Brien marched toward the stables, her worn boots kicking up dust with each determined step. At 26, she was the head housemaid of the sprawling estate, a position she'd earned through years of hard work and an iron will that could bend lesser souls to her purposes. Today, however, that iron will was facing its greatest test. "You there, stable hand!" she called out, spotting the broad-shouldered figure mucking out the horses' stalls. The man looked up, pushing his battered hat back to reveal sun-bronzed features and startlingly blue eyes. Maggie had seen him around for the past month, always working quietly, efficiently, never causing trouble. Perfect for what she needed. "Yes, ma'am?" His voice was low, with an educated edge that seemed at odds with his dusty work clothes. Maggie straightened her shoulders, gathering her courage. "I have a proposition for you, and I'll pay you $10 for your trouble." The stable hand, she thought his name was Jake or maybe it was John, set down his pitchfork and gave her his full attention. "I'm listening." "My sister's coming to visit from Boston," Maggie began, the words tumbling out faster than she intended. "She's married to a banker, has 3 perfect children, and wears dresses that cost more than I make in a year. She's also been insufferable since we were children, always lauding her good fortune over me." A slight smile tugged at the corner of the stable hand's mouth. "And you want to even the score?" "I may have exaggerated in my letters about having a beau," Maggie admitted, her cheeks flushing. "A respectable gentleman who's sweet on me. She's arriving tomorrow and staying for 3 days. I need someone to pretend to be courting me, just for meals and perhaps an evening stroll or two. Nothing improper, I assure you." The stable hand studied her for a long moment, those blue eyes seeming to see straight through to her soul. $10, you said? Plus an extra 5 if you can convince her you're completely besotted with me," Maggie added desperately. "I don't need your money, Miss O'Brien." He stepped closer, and Maggie caught the scent of hay, leather, and something else, expensive cologne that seemed wildly out of place on a ranch hand. "But I'll do it anyway. Consider it a favor." Maggie blinked in surprise. "Why would you do me a favor? We barely know each other." "Maybe I have my reasons." He extended a hand. "We should seal this agreement properly, and you should probably know my name if I'm going to be your sweetheart. It's James Cartwright." The name struck a chord in Maggie's memory, but she couldn't place why. She shook his hand, noting the calluses that came from hard work, but also the strength and confidence in his grip. "Thank you, Mr. Cartwright. I'll brief you on the details tonight after supper. Meet me by the Rose Garden at 8. "It's a date," he said with a wink that made her heart do an unexpected flip. That evening, Maggie found James waiting for her by the roses, cleaned up and wearing clothes that, while still simple, fit him far better than his work attire. In the golden light of sunset, he looked almost refined. "So tell me about this sister of yours," he said as they walked the garden path. Maggie launched into a description of Caroline, beautiful, accomplished, condescending Caroline, and found herself sharing more than she'd intended. Stories of childhood rivalries, of always being the practical sister, while Caroline was the pretty one, of working as a maid while Caroline married well and lived a life of leisure. James listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested. When she finally wound down, embarrassed by her own candor, he said, "Sounds to me like you got the better end of that deal. How do you figure? You earned everything you have. You know who you are. That's worth more than any rich husband." He plucked a rose and handed it to her. "Besides, from what I can see, you're plenty pretty yourself." Maggie's cheeks burned. "You don't have to start the act until tomorrow, Mr. Cartwright." "Who says I'm acting?" His eyes held hers for a moment that stretched too long to be comfortable. Then he smiled. "We should practice. If we're supposed to be courting, we need to look natural together." Over the next hour, James proved to be a surprisingly good actor, or perhaps he wasn't acting at all. He took her hand as they walked, let his fingers linger on hers when he helped her over an uneven patch of ground, and looked at her with such warmth that Maggie almost forgot this was all pretend. "Where did you learn to play a gentleman so well?" she asked as the evening drew to a close. Something flickered across his face. "I've had some experience with proper society, nothing worth mentioning." Caroline arrived the next afternoon in a flurry of silk and perfume, her perfect blonde curls arranged artfully beneath an elaborate hat. "Margaret, still working as a maid, I see. How quaint." Maggie bit back a sharp retort and forced a smile. "I'm head housemaid now, actually, runs the entire household staff." "How industrious." Caroline's tone suggested she found it anything but impressive. "And where is this mysterious beau you wrote about? I'm dying to meet him." "He'll be joining us for dinner," Maggie said, praying James wouldn't let her down. He didn't. When James appeared in the dining room that evening, Maggie barely recognized him. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, his hair neatly combed, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone born to wealth. He greeted Caroline with polished manners, then turned to Maggie with such genuine warmth that her breath caught. "My dear Miss O'Brien," he said, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I've been counting the hours until I could see you again." Throughout dinner, James played his role flawlessly. He was attentive without being overbearing, witty without being crass, and he looked at Maggie as though she were the only woman in the world. When he spoke of her, it was with respect and admiration that sounded entirely sincere. "Tell me, Mr. Cartwright," Caroline said over dessert, her eyes sharp with suspicion. "What is it you do for a living?" "I work with horses," James replied smoothly. "It's my passion." "A horse trader?" Caroline's nose wrinkled slightly. "Something like that." James smiled at Maggie. "Though I consider my real work to be making your sister happy." Even Caroline seemed momentarily disarmed by his charm. Over the next 2 days, Maggie found herself genuinely enjoying James's company. They took walks together, shared quiet conversations, and he made her laugh more than anyone had in years. He told her stories about his travels, his dreams, his love of the land, though he remained oddly vague about his past. The problem was, Maggie was starting to forget. This was all pretend. The way he looked at her, the gentle touch of his hand at her waist, the sound of his laughter, it all felt far too real. On Caroline's final evening, James invited Maggie to see the sunset from the ridge overlooking the ranch. As they stood together, the sky painted in brilliant oranges and purples, he turned to her. "Maggie, there's something I need to tell you." Her heart hammered. "What is it?" "My full name is James Cartwright III. I own this ranch." Maggie stared at him, the words not quite making sense. "You? What?" "I inherited it from my uncle 6 months ago. I'd been living in Boston, running the family business, but I hated it. So I came out here to see the ranch, and I decided to stay. I wanted to learn the operation from the ground up, to work alongside the men, rather than just giving orders from an office, so I kept my identity quiet and worked as a stable hand." "You're my boss," Maggie said slowly, her mind reeling. "This whole time, you've been my boss, and you let me order you around like you had every right to," James interrupted. "Because you do. You run this household better than I ever could. You're strong, capable, and completely admirable." He took her hands in his. "Maggie, what started as helping you fool your sister turned into something real for me. These past 3 days have been the happiest I've had in years. I'm not asking you to feel the same way, but I needed you to know the truth." Maggie's mind whirled. The mysterious stable hand was actually James Cartwright III, one of the wealthiest men in the territory. The man she'd been fake courting, the man she'd fallen for, owned the very ranch she worked on. "You lied to me," she said, though her voice lacked real anger. "I did, and I'm sorry." His grip on her hands tightened. "But my feelings for you are completely genuine. I've been watching you for weeks, Maggie, admiring your strength and spirit. When you asked me to pretend, I saw it as a chance to get to know you better. I never meant to deceive you about anything that mattered." "What matters?" Maggie asked softly. "This." He raised her hand to his heart. "The fact that I'm falling in love with you. The fact that these 3 days of pretending have shown me exactly what I want my future to look like, and you're in every moment of it." Maggie looked up at him, at this impossible man who'd mucked stables by day and played her gentleman by night. "My sister is going to be insufferably smug when she finds out I'm actually courting the owner of Silver Creek Ranch." James's face broke into a grin. "Does that mean—" "It means you still owe me that $15, Maggie said, then smiled. "And it means I'd very much like to stop pretending." When he kissed her, with the sunset blazing around them and the land stretching endlessly before them, Maggie O'Brien finally understood that sometimes the best things in life aren't the ones you plan for. They're the ones that find you when you're brave enough to take a chance. 3 months later, when Maggie walked down the aisle in her own beautiful dress, Caroline sat in the front row with an expression somewhere between delight and disbelief. But Maggie barely noticed. She only had eyes for James, her former stable hand, her pretend beau, her very real love. As it turned out, the best lies were the ones that turned into truth.